Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev. During the previous 12 hours we received lots of very interesting statements. Zelensky on Ukraine's European Union membership. The year 2027 is very important for us and I hope it is achievable, so that Putin cannot block our membership for decades. At the same time, Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that the European Union can't set a time frame for Ukraine's accession. It is not yet possible for us to set a date, but of course we will certainly provide the support you need to achieve your goal. Also, she emphasized that we will soon get our 20th sanctions package on Russia over the line. Our sanctions will keep draining Russia's revenues and weakening its war machine. So she believes that the 20th package will be applied very soon, but at the same time we know that the main reason why the 20th package of sanctions haven't been applied yet is the situation with the Druzhba pipeline. We know that Hungary and Slovakia rejected to support this 20th sanction package because they first want to see oil through the pipeline going to the territory of these countries. And today we received a report that Consul President Antonio Costa and Zelensky agreed that Ukraine will assess in the coming days how long it will take to repay the Druzhba pipeline. Speaking in Kiev, Costa said that when a European Union member state faces issues involving a third country, European Union institutions must step in and address them. So it seems that the 20th sanction package won't be applied very soon until at least Ukraine allows Hungary and Slovakia to receive oil through the Druzhba pipeline, which means that it can take weeks, months, or maybe even years before it happens. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours we received lots of updates from the line of combat contact. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians continue their offensive and counter-offensive operations. The Ukrainians destroyed the bridge in the area of the city by the name of Vasilievka. In this video we can see how Ukrainian aircraft attacked this bridge with aviation bomb, and as a result of this attack the bridge was damaged. So this is not the only supply line that the Russians use for their purposes further in the north, but obviously the Russian logistic suffered under these attacks. At the same time, we received a video published from the most northern part of the settlement of Novoyakovlevka, published by pro-Ukrainian sources. And in this video we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. And this video confirms that the Russians control these territories and that the Russians haven't lost these territories, control over these territories as a result of Ukrainian counterattack. At the same time, the map has been adjusted to the south of this dense network of the fortifications, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. And these changes were made based on the maps that were provided by neutral mappers. At the same time, I would like to remind you that several days ago we had videos from this area of how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through these tree lines and through these territories, so which means that several mappers took these videos as proofs that the Ukrainians control this territory. Anyway, we believe that most likely the Ukrainians have possibilities to send sabotage and reconnaissance groups deep inside of the territory controlled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, especially in the direction of Kamenskaya, but Russians, as we can see, control these territories with drones, and when they discover positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, they attack them immediately. Now let's talk about the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, where both the Russians and the Ukrainians continue their offensive operation. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that as a result of clashes the Russians established complete control over the settlement by the name of Ryzdvanka. But the most important thing that yet nobody from the Russian side, we're talking about reliable mappers, reliable experts, has confirmed this information. So if you check any map of any reliable provider pro-Russian source, you won't see changes in this area, so which is very interesting situation. Furthermore, the channels affiliated with the group of forces East also haven't confirmed that the Russians indeed managed to capture these territories. So as of now, we will keep the map as is. We will have two areas of control, both the Russian and Ukrainian, over the territory until we get additional clarifications. At the same time, neutral mappers reported that the Russians are trying to encircle the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa from the northeast and from the southeast. The Russians entered the settlement of Girka, and the Russians are trying to improve their positions along these tree lines and fortifications, which means that the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa is something that the Russians will try to take under complete control within the next days or weeks. At the same time, according to different mappers, the Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation on the northern flank. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 24th and this is the beginning of the 25th of February. The Ukrainians, according to neutral mappers, managed to improve their position significantly around the villages of Bratska, Andreevka, Astapovskaya, Gerasimovka, and so on. But I would like to point to attention that yet we haven't received even a single video with Ukrainians in these villages where we might see how Ukrainians are raising their flags and so on. So that is why we'll continue keeping these territories as a gray zone. Furthermore, lots of very reliable pro-Russian sources stated that all these villages are under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The only thing that Ukrainians are doing, they're outflanking and outmaneuvering these positions, trying to take positions behind these settlements with the purpose to cut logistics and to create a media victory. So obviously we need time to understand what is happening in this direction, but once again, pro-Russian sources are saying that the situation is difficult, but all these villages under their control, and pro-Ukrainian sources continue updating the maps in the Ukrainian favor. Today we have adjusted the map as well, based on the video that was published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video, for example, we can see vehicles that were entering the settlement of Novoalexandrovka and how Russians were attacking these vehicles with drones. So the presence of vehicles on the territory of these settlements, as for me, means that the Ukrainians most likely managed to improve their position significantly in this area. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map. We believe that the Ukrainians have stronger control over these territories than the pro-Russian resources complain. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dobropolye-Belitska direction. During the previous 12 hours, the map has been adjusted, as you can see. This is the situation by the end of the 24th of February. This is the beginning of the 25th of February. The map has been adjusted to the east of the settlement of Belitska based on the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources from the territory of the southeastern part of the settlement. Here we can see how Ukrainians of the 25th Separate Assault Battalion were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the southeastern part of the settlement, also using infantry. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Ukrainians most likely managed to restore complete control over the southeastern part of the settlement, but at the same time, this video confirms that the Russians most likely have control over these the railways and fields further to the east from the settlement. Now let's talk about the Kostiantynivka direction. The most interesting updates are coming from this area. During the previous nights, several pro-Russian sources adjusted maps in this area. According to information we have, the Russians, as you can see, improved their position significantly in the fields between the settlements of Sofiivka, Drushkovka and Kostiantynivka. It seems that the Russians are going to continue advancing further in the northeastern direction with the purpose to get as close as possible to the city of Drushkovka and to the northwestern part of the city of Kostiantynivka, with the purpose then to establish complete fire control over the main supply lines between these settlements. And another important thing is that Russians and pro-Ukrainian sources during the previous 24 hours published additional videos about the situation around the Khrushchevsky water reservoir. So this is a very important video that I would like to discuss with you. In this video we can see the consequences of attacks that that were carried out by Russians during the previous 2 days. Here we can see that the dam was damaged and completely destroyed, and here we can see the water moving further in the northeastern direction. As you can see, the consequences are huge, and the entire territory to the northeast of the reservoir is completely flooded with the water from the water reservoir. So a lot of territories were flooded, as you can see, and furthermore the water covered the main supply and logistic lines between the settlements of Alexeyevka, Drushkovka and Kostiantynivka. So if we return back to the map, we will see that the water, as I told you, went in the northeastern direction, and currently all these territories are flooded without any possibilities for Ukrainians to use this road for the logistic purposes. The Ukrainians are no longer able to redeploy their units, reinforcements, supply and reserves from the settlement of Alexeyevka, Drushkovka in the direction of the southern part of the city of Kostiantynivka. And as we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians are trying to use the situation at maximum level. They're trying to break through Ukraine defense in the southern and the southwestern parts of the city. And during the previous night, additional changes on the ground were recorded in Russian favor. More precisely, additional changes were recorded and the gray zone was expanded. So the Russians are keeping advancing and the Russians are trying to dig in deeper. But we need to understand that sooner or later, the water will disappear from this region and the Ukrainians will be able to restore a normal logistic. Obviously it will take up to 10 days, but so that is why the Russians are limited in their timings. They need to finish the major parts of the battle for the southern part of the city of Kostiantynivka within the next 10 days. Otherwise the Ukrainians would be able to stabilize the situation once again and not allow the Russians to keep advancing further in the northern direction. Furthermore, several sources stated that most likely in coming days the Russians will begin their offensive operation in the direction of the northwestern part of the city of Chasiv Yar, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the second important supply line, that road N20 between the cities of Drushkovka and Kostiantynivka, and Russians will try to establish complete fire control over this territory from the northeast. And if it happens, most likely we can say that the city of Kostiantynivka is caught in pincers. Now let's talk about the Slaviansk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous night, additional changes were recorded around the settlement of Fedorovka Druga. This information and these changes were provided by pro-Ukrainian sources, and according to these changes, the armed force of the Russian Federation began infiltration process towards the settlement of Fedorovka Druga from the northeast. This is a very bad piece of news for Ukrainians, because if the Russians are able to answer the settlement of Fedorovka Druga from behind, outflanking the main Ukraine's positions, this can intensify the battle for the settlement itself, and it will force in coming days to abandon their positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this maneuver is a very interesting one. Probably nobody expected that the Russians would attack positions of the armed forces of Ukraine using these roads of attacks, but this happened, and now let's wait and see what is going to be next. But it seems that the battle for the Fedorovka Druga fortified area will be finished much faster than expected. At the same time, the Russians are bombing strongholds further to the north, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional forces in the direction of the settlement, and trying to destroy as many as possible positions of FPV drone operators. Furthermore, we see that the situation for defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine in this pocket are continuing deteriorating as well. During the previous nights, a very interesting video was published by pro-Russian sources. In this video, we can see how Russians managed to discover the evacuation team of the armed forces of Ukraine that were trying to evacuate soldiers from the line of combat contact and wounded soldiers. And this episode took place right exactly at this point. Several soldiers were evacuated, and when they evacuated, the vehicle began moving in this direction, probably towards the settlement of Kaliniki. So, which means that the Ukrainians are losing their possibilities to hold their lines in this area, and that the Russians are pushing forward, which means that most likely in this area we will see huge changes also in coming days. Now let's move further. And let's discuss the situation in the northern directions. And first, let's talk about the Kharkiv area. According to information we have, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly around the settlements of Grafskaya and Semyonovka. Based on the report that was published by pro-Russian sources, we have adjusted the map. According to information we have, this morning, the group of forces north finished the battle for the settlement of Grafskaya. Based on the report published by the group of forces north, we have adjusted the map. So we see that the Russians managed to establish complete control over this important territory, and now the Russians will focus their attention on the next forties to the south. We're talking about this territory, including the village of Verkhnya Pisarevka. The Russians will try to begin clashes for this area as soon as possible, and they will try to take under complete control this territory also as soon as possible, because if Russians are able to force Ukrainians to fall back from this direction, the Russians will be able from these positions to begin advancing further in the eastern direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Bielye Kolodezh from behind. So it seems that the battle for flanks of the city of Bielye Kolodezh have begun, and it seems that in coming days the Russians will intensify their offensive activities. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.